Hello, everyone. Welcome to Houdini Hangout. It is the 3rd of August. Can't believe it's August already. Hope you're having a great week so far. Here we are on a Wednesday again. It seems like the internet is working better on Wednesdays, so I don't know what that's all about. Maybe Tuesday nights, a bunch of my neighbors were downloading something, or I don't know. Very strange. Maybe planned maintenance at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday night for the local Spectrum disaster that is my internet. Hopefully we will all have something interesting to learn tonight. After a lot of the conversations last week, I was kind of thinking, okay, so there seems to be a lot of interest in this, like how to bring, one simulation into another, or there's always this talk of these multi-solver workflows and things like that, which, to be honest, I think are incredibly difficult to get set up unless you really know specifically what you're trying to do. It seems like it should be easier, but there's a lot of caveats and catches, I think, in there. So I basically was just coming up with something that could be a way of passing data from one solver kind of into another. And I was just thinking that, a lot of people were talking about this fluid and having some collisions after the fact. So I was thinking, well, couldn't you just take a flip fluid and pass that through into something like Vellum and have that then run collisions based on those point positions? Like, isn't that something that, could be done fairly easily? So, I played around with it a little bit and I got something working, and I think we can kind of dial it in and maybe explore it a little bit more, see kind of what we can do that's maybe more interesting than what I have, or we can, come up with some different, thoughts or whatever. So, so that's the idea for tonight. As far as going forward, next week I won't be streaming. I will be in Vancouver. I'll be there for SIGGRAPH, doing some meetings with clients and things like that, and also I'll be getting to participate. Cool. Hey, Zach, nice to see you. Glad to have you here. So next week, I will be in Vancouver. I'll be doing, like I said, just some client presentations, nothing really public or anything crazy like that. But during the Hive event, we'll be doing an education team presentation, basically. So I'll be there for that. And then there's going to be like a Houdini battle that they're setting up. I don't know if you've seen that before. Houdini battle is, where you get 4 different people and they all get some sort of prompt and then have a chance to make some art really quickly and hopefully come out with something cool. So I'm gonna be in that. So hopefully that will go well. I don't think it's gonna be live streamed just because of all the craziness of the conference and things like that. I think there's some things that will be announced there. I'm not sure exactly who the participants will be, but that'll be pretty fun. And I think they're going to be it's going to be a live event, and then they'll be posting it, I think, after the fact. So keep an eye out for that as well. That should be pretty cool to see. We just had a meeting about that today, so should be an interesting thing. We'll see how I do. Hopefully, I'm not like matched up against some person from I don't know, Pixar or something crazy, but hopefully it won't be that intense. But anyways, so yeah, that's what's coming up for next week. So I will be away for next week, but the week after that I should be back and ready to roll, unless some crazy transportation flight type thing happens, which has been more and more the norm. So I guess keep your eyes open. I'll be posting on our Discord channels about what's going on there. But anyways, so let's dive in and take a look at that. I do have I kind of set up a thing already, so you might see me glancing over every so often just to get a sense of what the heck I did before, just so I can refresh my brain a little bit. But so let's dive in. Please, as always, drop your comments in chat. I'd love to hear, what you guys are thinking, or any any ways that you could see it being done better or alternatives or anything like that. It's just, I really would hope that this can be an open conversation, that this isn't just, me just telling you how to do something, but that it's something that we can all kind of learn and grow together. It's kind of always my hope for this channel. So, please feel free to put your comments in chat, no matter if you've been using Houdini for a day or 10 years. So, yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in and start messing around with this setup a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a drink of water. Sorry. So the first thing that I did was I was like, well, this doesn't need to be anything overly crazy. So let's just start with like a shelf tool from, the particle fluid shelf. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to grab the flip tank here. I'm just going to hold down control and I click that. That's going to make sure it gets put right at the center of the scene. And the one thing that I kind of realized from the start was that a lot of the flip fluid stuff is now this narrow band. And if you're not familiar with that term, basically what that means is this tank that we've created actually is able to simulate all the way down to the bottom here. However, what it does is it forms this narrow band that it's actively kind of simulating. And as that needs to adjust and kind of, maybe collisions are happening with it, things like that, it will adjust. It'll if there's something colliding in there, it'll form a band around that as well. So basically it's kind of creating this surface representation for where the surface of this fluid is, and then allowing you to save a lot of time calculating stuff that isn't actually a part of the fluid simulation at that moment. So what we're going to do is actually turn that off, because really in this case, we wouldn't really want that. We want there to be a nice stable count of particles so that when we pass this on into the next step, we can make sure that the particles remain, 1-to-1 and they aren't changing every frame. That's called reseeding. That's a pretty common thing with flip fluid, just because there'll be times where maybe a voxel gets too sparsely populated. It'll need to kind of fill that in, or it might become too densely populated and it'll need to thin that out just based on the pressure and things like that. There's obviously a lot going on there to calculate the reseeding, but just something that you keep in mind when you're working with flip is that it's not really a continuous count of particles by default. So what's going on here is there's a wave tank basically. It's actually like, well, first of all, I can see all my scene, so it's solving everything. So we're sourcing this kind of jittery noise. I'm actually going to turn that off because it's really not going to matter for us. We can just leave it at 1, and then it's not going to try to resimulate. I'm actually going to end up using these particles, I think, to put some velocities on there and make a little velocity field and stuff like that. So we'll do that in a second. But all right, so we've got this built first, and what we're going to do is you can see right here that this narrow band particles is actually has a reference, or an expression inside of it. So if we go down here into edit expression, you right click on it and go in there, you can actually see what the expression is. And what we're looking at here is it's looking into this auto dop network at the surface type, and if it equals 4, this returns true. So what we're going to do is let's take a look at the nodes. Oops, that got put down here. We've got our auto dop network. I'll just call this maybe flip sim. Actually, I'll call this sim flip tank. It's really tiny. Sorry, I'm sure you can't see that. Just realizing that as I'm typing in here. All right, let's organize this a little bit. So this comes in a little messy, but basically what you're dealing with here is this is the initial tank. This is what we were looking at when we started. Just color that a light green, and then these are going to be our outputs, and I'll color those in a light purple because they're related to this tank right here. So what we're going to see is this flip tank fluid is where the geometry is going to come out. And normally what you would do here is you would have your import fields come in, and you'll see that there's a surface and velocity and all this stuff, and we're going to pass it through this and make a surface cache and all that kind of thing. But I'm not going to do any of that in this case. So here's what I'm going to do. Really all we're going to need is this dop import node right here. They have updated this a little bit. If we look at dop import and we switch this back to the regular one, this is what it used to look like. Now it's a little bit streamlined, cleaned up type situation like that. But basically all this is doing is bringing in those particles. It's not bringing in volumetric data, nothing like that, no velocities from the simulation, because we're really not going to want that stuff. We really just want those particles that we simmed. So this is looking to that DOP network and bringing in the object here. So, and then here's the geometry data path, which is basically just bringing in this visualization geometry. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm not going to use this at all because this is just bringing in the interior for a render. So that we don't need. And then what I can do here is I could just call this, since we're going to be importing this here, why don't I just call this sim Vellum collide, because that's where we're going to do our Vellum collide, right? So here's our flip tank and here's our Vellum collide. They're kind of in just their own little separate worlds. Now this is a DOP network here, right? So this is a little different. You know, you have to just be careful there because this one's different. This has got our standard, you know, old kind of non-SOP way of doing it. The only reason I'm doing it this way is because I can use the shelf tool, do it really quickly, and it's not really going to make, really, it's not going to be a very complicated setup, so it's kind of silly to go in and set up maybe a thing that would be a little bit more custom in SOPs versus just dropping down a shelf tool. So that's the main reason why I'm doing this. If we go into our flip solver here, we can see it should be under a volume motion, I believe. And if we do, actually, sorry, let me just think about where this is. Oh, well, first of all, I'm going to turn off the reseeding. Why is that not? Sorry, just realizing that doesn't make any sense. Let me see. Let me pull up my little cheat sheet here and see what the case was there. Right. There is a behavior that is not happy with this, and it's needing to reseed these particles. Why is that? Oh, here's our narrowband. That's probably why, because its narrowband is enabled. And again, this one has an expression. Yeah, it's the narrowband. You're right. So here, that's what I need to turn off. Particle field, perfect. That's what I needed. Duh. Sorry about that. Yeah, so then I can turn off the reseed particles. That'll make sure that these aren't reseeding. The other thing I want to do is just make this a tiny bit smaller. We don't really need that much fluid. So let's go back over here to our initial and we can just adjust the size of this. You know, maybe it's 2.5, even that's a little on the big side. Let's just do it like that. Just a small tank. And I could just lift up this top just in case we get like a splash or something in this tank. Just make sure we've got a little bit more room. Cool. So there is the our tank. And obviously if we go in here and just let this simulate, it's really not going to do a whole lot, just going to kind of sit there. So we should probably get some sort of velocities going here. So let's do that as well. So let's just make a little custom velocity here. We can just take these particles. I'm just going to vector, attribute adjust vector. I'm going to add, that's weird, that didn't connect. I'm going to add this here and I'm going to turn on our visualization for the velocity. And then here I'm going to do this to noise. So we get like a noisy volumetric field here. Sorry, a noisy point velocity field. And then I'm going to change that into a volume in order to kind of advect our fluid around a little bit. So let's do that. And yeah, that looks fine for right now. We could maybe tweak this a little bit. And the other thing actually I just remembered is I'm not going to give it like, I think I'm just going to have it go in X and the Z axis. So it's kind of all going horizontally. So it just kind of pushes the fluid around instead of like lifting it up and doing some weird stuff like that. And I'll make sure the animation is on just so we can get some variation here. Great. And then we can do an, let's see here. Copy over that. Rasterize. Let's do volume rasterize attributes. We'll grab this here and the attribute will be V. So now we have a velocity that we are sourcing, and we could tie that actually to our, let's see, I think here we've got a particle separation. No, we're not actually setting this here. Okay, so let me just, yeah, I can just grab that, come back over here. I'm not sure why that's erroring. It shouldn't be, but whatever. We will just do this maybe, paste relative references, and we can just multiply that by a little bit to get, oh, that's too much. Probably just do it by 2. And that'll give us, you know, a relatively, you know, a reasonable amount of velocity grid size without, you know, a ton of calculation time. So, all right, so we've got our velocity here. And that's looking good. Then I'm just going to put another null down here and just say out vel. Come over here and we can just do a source. Nope. Oh. Interesting. Did they change the icon for that? They sure did. That's interesting. Got balloons now. I believe if we put this in here, that should work. We'll grab the SOP path. I'm doing this a little different than the way I did it last time, so hopefully this will work just fine. Should. But, all right, so let's do this. We'll take the source volume, which is V. Target field will be vel. And we'll just say, yeah, I guess we can just add it in there. That's fine. And then for the activation, I'm just going to do a $F modulo, goodness, I don't know, 24 equals 0. And what that'll do is every 24 frames just kind of give us a nice hit of velocity here in our sim. So let's see if that works. Yep, working. Cool. So that's kind of interesting, but I think it could be a little bit better. It's a little too, I don't know, feels a little too rough maybe. Let's see here. I'm actually going to bring this size of this down. I think that'll be better. Yeah, that's still relatively low. So the other way I did it last time was, I'll show this as well because it's kind of an interesting thing. I hadn't really done this before, so I'm just going to copy this over and we'll just take a look at it. Pull this out of the oven. It's already baked. Drop this in here. So this is just a VOP, right? But it's for gas, you know, for like a gas field basically. And so I was kind of playing around with some different noise types. But what this is doing is just looking at the position of each of the voxels in the velocity, or you know, in the grid basically, and it is coming up with noise from that, and I'm then setting the y component to 0, second component, and mixing it in with the original velocity here. So it's kind of just blending those two together. And And what I can do with it then, let's take a look at what that does. So this should just be going the whole time, right? It's just going to kind of make this, sort of morphing, moving, fluid thing here going on. And you can see how this is actually causing it to have these kind of compressed areas, which obviously would be overlapping, overlapping particles. Basically, if you were doing this in a simulation, those should obviously be colliding a little bit more. But without the reseeding, it's not trying to resolve where those particles are. Normally it would. So let us also, what I did here is I had this ramp, and what I was doing there was using that to kind of set the, I guess the intensity of this mix here, so I can bias that, right? And what that'll do is now I have this little ramp that can go through at certain times and can like add a ramp of velocity in there. So this is maybe a little bit cleaner way of what I was hoping to do in that other thing. I don't know why that wasn't exactly working, but I was hoping that maybe that would be a better solution, but this seems just fine. So yeah, so we get some interesting patterns here. And what you can do is you can play with these different things. Like that's a flow noise. So instead, if we wanted to pull in a curl noise and see what that looked like, we could do that as well. So that's what a curl noise would look like. A little bit tighter, from a kind of swirl standpoint, maybe. And obviously there's a ton of different attributes in here that you can kind of tweak and set and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's kind of an interesting one as well. And obviously you could play around with these however you'd like. So let's see what the turbulent noise looks like. A little bit less intense. The amplitude might just be down on it. It's kind of hard to match the amplitudes. Actually, that's funny. This one's higher amplitude. It's just always kind of interesting to try to match the amplitudes between different noise types and things like that. It's not always a one-to-one situation. So yeah, it feels maybe a little too bouncy. So let's do this curl noise. Looks pretty nice. I was kind of playing around with a bunch of different options here, obviously. So yeah, we'll stick with this maybe, and this will just give us an interesting little kind of burst of movement every so often in our simulation. So yeah, so what's going on here again, like I said, is we're taking this position of our voxels in this case in our grid here, and because while there are particles happening here, there are also voxels with velocity and surface and things like that in the background. So from there, I'm taking the time, I'm putting that, multiplying it by 0.1, and just putting that into the offset, and that's just giving it a little bit of a random look. And then I'm taking the frame number, I'm fitting that from 1 to 240, since I know that that's my range here, then outputting a 0 to 1, putting that into a ramp, and then fitting that based on how much intensity I want basically between those two. When these little hits that I keyframed here, or added on my ramp, I should say, when I did those, then I fit those using this fit range. And then that drives the mix between the noise that's coming in here and the original velocity that's coming in previously. So this is mixing noise and the original velocity to just kind of, to not totally override the interesting velocities that you're getting from the flip sim. So it goes back and forth between, in this case, 1, which would be all the way to input 2, which is the original velocity, and it comes back when the pulses come, that goes to 0.5. So it kind of halfway blends when the velocity noise comes in and then goes back to the full flip sim once it's out. So that gives it a chance to kind of settle back down and do some more normal fluid kind of simulation stuff. So anyways, that's working just fine. Obviously this volume source works. It was a little too rough. So I'll just leave that there for right now. We can always, tweak or add that back in if we wanted to. So, all right, so we've got all this stuff. It's doing more or less a flip sim, nothing too outrageous is happening here. We've got just a little tank of fluid that's kind of moving around. Another thing that you can do, and I'm just remembering this now, so we can go into this flip solver, and under our particle motion, we can add in some separation here. And what this will do, let's just maybe do it a little less on the separation rate. Let's try that first. So what this is going to do is try to kind of keep all of your particles apart. It's going to try to keep them from, all getting put into the same, little space here, right? So you could do something like this in your simulation. It's going to kind of smooth everything out a little bit. So, you could obviously get this quite a bit more aggressive, and it will try to keep all of the particles from getting compressed together. So in this case, we're keeping a little bit of that, separation basically between each point. This is a little bit like a smoothing type step. So it might not get you the results you want. So, we can leave it on, we can turn it off, but it's good to know that it's there if we want to keep our points apart just a little bit more than they normally would be in a simulation like this, where we're just kind of pushing stuff around and doing some random stuff with it. So, yeah, that's another feature that we can see it exists in here as well. So I'm going to turn that off for right now, just to kind of let it stay the way it was. And yeah, cool. All right, so let's come back over here and take a look at this. So now this is just bringing in our points, right? We have our just a color, point position, your p-scale, and velocity coming in here, and that's pretty much it. There's not really anything else coming in through this node. And if we check at the beginning, we have 60,595. Let's check at the end here. Let's let it sim all the way to the end. What do we got at the end? 60,595. So we've got the same number of points. Things aren't doing anything too crazy there, so that's great. So let's now talk about what might be needed in order to make this, work as a Vellum object. So the one thing that I did previously was, just remembering here, was pulling out everything but the p-scale and the position, obviously. So I'm just going to do an attribute delete here and just run this in kind of the non-selected mode, which kind of inverts everything. And we'll just keep the P and the P-scale. And that'll just make sure that we're getting a decent approximation of the spacing that we want here. So when we put this into something like a Vellum grain, excuse me, we'll see that this gets changed over a little bit here. And so now we have these particle sizes that are thankfully not gigantic or anything like that. I don't think this is going to just, oh yeah, it will a little bit. So we can just cut that down just a little bit, just to make sure that they're not, overlapping too badly right from the start. So this is going to give us our individual spheres. And actually, you know what? I'm just remembering why that's colored like that. It's because we have this liquid material on it. So let's do that. That'll be probably a little easier to see, a little less crazy. So from here now we have these grains that have been created, and the thing that we want to do is be able to keep them as closely pinned to their position as we can, right? So if we were just to do, say, something like Vellum Solver, that's weird. I don't know why it only connected one of them. So if we did this, right, and let's just do a ground position, and I'll just move that down a little bit. I think it's going to be like, yeah, maybe it'll be 0.6. I don't know. We'll do that. Cool. So obviously if I do this and hit play, it's just going to be a regular grain simulation. There's not going to be anything happening here. So we need a way to be able to tie those point positions in this that came out of this simulation here, right? And they're going to move around. We need to tie those to our, to our simulation. Now, in this case, you're just seeing it visualized with the spheres on it. This is still the same input simulation. So we kind of want that to be, if you wanted zero overlap in this stage, would setting the particle size in grains to the exact p-scale value? Yeah, so what is actually happening there is I'm pretty sure that that's a multiplier, I'm pretty sure. Because like if we did this, yeah, you can see here it comes in at 0.18, and then here it is 0.025. So I'm pretty sure that what's going on there is that it's multiplying it. Let me just see if I keep it at 1. Nope. That's strange. Yeah, so the problem is going to be that I'm pretty sure that what was our p scale here is 0.18. So if we do that, you're going to get something like that, and that's obviously not going to do what we're hoping for. So yeah, I'm not totally sure what's going on there. Yeah, neither of those are. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm not 100% sure why that is the case. But yeah, if you want there not to be overlap, you would probably need to do something like you'd probably want to do something like a relaxation at this stage. I can't really think of any way to do it automatically because you're getting these point positions from the flip simulation to start, and we want that. Yeah, exactly. It does seem like it should be a multiplier. I totally agree. I'm not sure what's going on there, but yeah, it feels like it should be a multiplier. Yeah, but you can obviously dial this in as needed. So like what I did, I think, was I set it to 0.5, and that's pretty darn close. I mean, it's going to have some, some collision penetration that's going to have to fix at the beginning. But yeah, it definitely seems like it should be some sort of a multiplier. I'm not sure exactly why. Oh, that's so weird. Okay. Well, that makes a little more sense. It's just literally setting the diameter of the particles. So if we set this, that's what it's originally at. That's 0.18. Okay. So that's weird. It's a diameter. I feel like usually it's a radius, but yeah. Anyways, so the way that you would get these to be constrained would be by adding in a vellum constraint. And the cool thing with these is that a lot of times you'll just do, vellum configure something, right? And that'll give you kind of the default, maybe like some sort of, it sets the mode for you and everything like that. But you can go in and actually change these constraint types. There's a whole bunch of them here, right? So you can go in and kind of use them from scratch. So, so this should be pinned to target is what we're going to want it to be. I'm just going to put the visualizer there. And we want it to be a soft constraint because we don't want it to be hard. We don't want it to be locked to it. And then we want it to match the animation, and we want the group type to be points. And I think, there we go. All right. We are getting somewhere. And so I'm going to say none with the orientation. We don't need any orientation locked for these because they're just can come right back to it, right? So let's turn the stiffness down. And what we should see is this should start to follow our simulation. And it's a little chaotic right now because it's maybe a little bit too soft in order to actually fit those, fix those positions as it's kind of flowing through the simulation. So first of all, let's add a couple substeps here because that'll help solve this constraint, right? So that's already going to start helping as well. It's a little less crazy. You can see that these particles now are going to be they're going to be trying to follow the constraint that we put on them before. So they can't perfectly follow them, right? Because they have these soft constraints on them, but we can adjust the strength of how much we want them to follow. You can see there's some like interesting little sheets here that are kind of forming because they're all trying to pull to that position where we kind of ask them to be from the fluid simulation, right? So in this case here, our stiffness is going to be a big part of that. So as we, go up by a factor, in this case of 10, and simulate this again, we're going to now have this fluid and it's going to try to follow really closely there. The only problem here is we get a little bit of a bouncing behavior here too sometimes. So we've got to, there's some things there that we want to try to kind of cancel out, right? We don't want it to be actually bouncing around like that. But what we're going to get here is the collision behavior that we want, while also still having the fluid interaction, on top of that. So, maybe 10's a little bit too high in this case. So what we could do is we could set it back to 1, and this is a multiplier of this. So we could set this in between to something like 5 and give that. Oops, sorry. I have that kind of highlighted weird. It looks very strange. So there's kind of like this moment where it has to try to figure out what exactly it wants to do at the beginning there, kind of fix all of those constraints, right? But then after a second, it kind of starts to fall into its, fall into what we're asking it to do, basically. So the other thing that you can do with these is you can help to the word is damp some of those velocities out, right? And so, just went to the end there by accident. Just wanted to play it again and see it in real time, but it's only going to take a couple more frames. There we go. Great. So we've got this bouncing going on here, right? So we want to fix that up. Like a lot of what we want to have happen is happening here, right? We've got these particles are actually colliding with each other. They're a little crazy, so we got to calm them down a little bit. And what we can do with that is we can come in here and just maybe up this a little bit. We'll just do it by 10 there. Yeah, let me just try to remember if there was anything else in there that I had set. I don't think so. I'm going to turn off actually the guide geometry because that can slow it down a little bit. So maybe in this case, we'll not go all the way to 5. Maybe we'll go 2.5 and yeah, take a look at that, what that looks like. So what this should be doing is trying to resolve those collisions, resolve those points back to those, constrained places that we've given them, right? We've given them a constraint to specific spots in our kind of fluid that's going on here. So if we look at, in this case, actually I'm going to turn this off as from display as spheres. And maybe what we can do is we can see the difference between what's going on at this level here with our simulation. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's not cooked. Huh. Oh, I know why. I didn't up my cache here on this. So this is only set to 5,000. So I'll up that a bit. And then do the same down here just so they don't have to resim. Right here. My apologies there. So I'll let that run again. And here we can obviously see, the point positions that that we're dealing with. And it should be noted as well that I haven't constrained the boundaries of this simulation. So the points are able to they're able to move around a little bit and kind of, if they need to move around on the outside to get to where they need to be, that's totally fine. So I'm kind of imagining this would be more of like an abstract thing. Not obviously, this isn't obviously simulating anything in reality. But, I'm thinking, if you were doing something with a bunch of little objects or something like that, and you wanted to have them be part of, you could make sure that they have the right, scale on them, and then from there we could you could have them collide with this Vellum simulation. It's obviously doing something sort of similar to what it was doing before, but there's going to be cases where it's trying to pull into a general area instead of to a specific point. So like here, you can see that there's a bunch of particles there, right? And so what that's trying to do in this case is have, that's weird, is have all of those particles try to kind of clump together, right? So that is something that, you know, we could fix with a little bit of that particle separation too as well. So, you know, there's multiple levels here of things working. And obviously that's kind of the tricky part of dealing with anything that might be multiple simulations working together, is that anything you do in the first one is going to affect the second one and so on and so forth. In fact, I think I'm going to add just a little bit of particle separation to that, just so that we have less of those, you know, really dense areas there. So let's do that first. Let's go in here. We'll apply the particle separation. And like I had before, maybe we'll do it to like 0.25. And that'll give us a little bit of, you know, it'll keep those really dense areas from hopefully forming. And sure enough, that's already starting to help us out a little bit. Cool, cool, cool. All right, great. So what I'm going to do there is actually just do a file cache, just to cache that out so that we're not accidentally resimming that again and again. Do that to disk in the background. Let's just call this flip points, save to disk in background. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how difficult would it be to introduce random p-scales? Yeah, it's a great question. And I was thinking about getting to that for sure. Yeah. So with the p-scales, what I'm thinking of doing is yeah, adding those all randomly. Now the big question there is, how do we make sure that these are staying where they should be? In fact, what I can do probably here, since we have these, yep, I'm going to add an ID attribute, and silly, should have done that from the start. I'm going to save this to disk again, and that should go pretty quickly anyways. But yeah, so we obviously want to know what each point is, right? We don't want them to be moving around and acting crazy and doing all that kind of stuff. We want to know which ID matches with which point. So now, yeah, let's give that a shot. No, I don't think Flip does allow for random p-scales. So so that would be the part here that we'd be able to introduce something different than what would happen in Flip, right? Flip, I don't think really likes anything like that at all. I can't think of a scenario where it would have. No, I've never seen that. So I don't think so. I think it would freak it out or do something crazy. I mean, maybe it would do something, but it certainly wouldn't be a normal scenario to have random p-scales in there. So what we could do in this case then, right, is instead of at this stage, so I'll just do the display as spheres, right? What we could do is turn this off, right? Now it's just taking the original p-scale that came in before. So really all this is doing is setting it, right? So in this case, it's setting it to 0.25. Okay, great. So let's do that. Let's do a float, attribute adjust float. And we'll take this in at this point, and we also want to keep the ID as well. Oh, interesting. Maybe I need to do this. Is that going to do better for us? Yep. Yeah, for some reason the visualization was not giving us the ID. That's interesting. Let me just double check that that's true. Yeah. Oh no, there it is. Why is it not saving? That is really strange. Let me do reload. There we go. Just was loading weird. That's interesting. Well, if you ever run into that, just hit reload geometry and it should hopefully update your attributes. Cool. All right, so we have the ID now passed through, so that's great. Let's do a p-scale here, and I'll just visualize it at this stage. This has that. We'll turn this off, and here we can set this to be. We can just do set initial. Or it can turn me into a complete liar. All right, that's the problem. I guess set always is what we need. Weird. But instead of that, let's just do random, and we can do minimum, maximum. Let's do it with a middle and a range. So the middle value would be, what did we have before? 0.05. And the range length, we'll have it down way a lot. Something like, I don't know, maybe like that. Maybe not so drastic. Maybe, yeah, sure, like that. And why don't we do some some outliers? Not so much. We'll just do a couple random outliers here and there. Kind of a fun little tool here. We can add in some random outliers. Probably freak out a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see how that deals with it. Great. Okay, that looks good. Just making sure we've got everything here. All right, let's take a look and see what, oh, bye. Oh, this is the question, I guess. Is Vellum going to like that? There is something here. Sorry, hold on a second. There is something here where it will say assume uniform radius. Okay. Hopefully that's good. Yep. That was what we needed to fix. Looks like all the big ones went to the top. That's kind of interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. Pretty interesting though. It's kind of a neat look. It's almost like they're floating on top. And it seems as well like having just that little bit of particle separation enforced at our flip level has stabilized some of that motion. I also did turn down the stiffness as well a little bit, but it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting look. We'll let it play back here. Some of it's a little crazy. I mean, I am doing some really weird stuff in the flip sim where I'm just randomly pushing around the fluid, right? So that's a little strange, but yeah, you can see how we're basically taking this. So let's just get to the end here. Maybe we'll look at the end here, and I'm going to put down if I can type, I'm going to put down a switch, and we'll pull in the points here and these points here, I believe. And I'm actually going to turn off, what is that? Just do an attribute delete. Be the quickest way to do it. Just going to turn off the sphere so we can actually see a little bit better what's going on here. Sure, that's fine. Kind of quick and dirty. So yeah, so I just want to see the difference here between these two, right? So we can see that there's obviously quite a bit different happening. This is the original flip fluid simulation here, and then this is the kind of resolved point positions from our Vellum simulation, right? And we can see that like even just this here, right? We've got particles that are way high up here, probably because of, obviously some of them are smaller, so they're kind of collapsing down. Some of them are bigger, so they're sitting way up on top of the surface. So like this point up here is probably one of those really large points. Let's see if I'm right. Yep, sure enough, it is a big point sitting up on top there. Kind of curious to see what it looks like from the bottom as well. It might be kind of interesting now that I'm thinking of it. Let's see. Yeah, that's kind of cool. And the cool thing here is you could put in any, that's really funny down in the corner there. It looks like it's like popcorn, like flipping around. You could put down geometry that would cause collisions in this case, right? And it's going to try to, move around it. Like I could probably just put a collider in the middle of this and yeah. So what happens with that stiffness? So what the stiffness is actually doing. So if you think about it, to force them to intersect. No, it's okay. Yeah, don't have to apologize. Vellum really doesn't want to intersect because it's a point solving, solution, regardless of what you're using. It's all done on points. I think it would want to try to resolve it. I don't think you could force it to really intersect. So yeah, let's just turn it up and we'll take a look at it. What it's going to do is it's going to try. So what this constraint is doing here is trying to resolve. Right. Okay. I got you. So sort of. Yes, it would be a perfect match. But the problem there is we can do it. I mean, we can easily set it to 1 million. Here we go. Boom. 1 million. And what I usually recommend doing in Vellum is if you're trying to figure out what the right setting is for something like stiffness or whatever, go by tens. Go by a whole factor of 10, because honestly, I find that's your quickest way to dial it in, because if you go to a factor of 10, right, this range goes up to 10. So you can always say, oh, that was too much, and then go back in here and dial it, right? But by jumping, further like this, you can always kind of really quickly make these adjustments and stuff like that. So that's personally, how I do it, because you can always dial this in as well. So, like in this case, if it was 10 and we put this to 10, it's going to be 100, right? Because it's multiplying those together. So anyways, 1 million, let's do that. So yes, it's going to try really hard to make these fit the sim a lot harder than it was before. And it's probably going to get real crazy. So let's see what happens. Oh, actually, look at that. I'm really surprised. That was really interesting, because I didn't even try to go that high. So when, yeah, you definitely could add velocities to it and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. So it was interesting. Like when we had it lower, it was actually a lot more jumpy and crazy. It's really interesting. Like this is way more. Okay, I think I see what's going on here. Sorry, I'm kind of processing this in real time. So like this is like crazy and is like doing all these nuts, bouncy weirdness, right? And what is happening there, I think, is that it's just stiff enough to not want to collapse into its, rest position, if we want to say, from the fluid simulation, because basically we have a tether, right? We have a tether that's connected to these vellum points, from the flip fluid point to these vellum points, right? And it's trying to match the animation, right, with that tether. So as those points animate, it's like kind of has this bungee, right? And that rubber band is where we're putting the stiffness on. So yeah, so I started going higher with it in this case, and I didn't think about going like crazy higher and how that would actually kind of, yeah, Yeah, gravity is on for Vellum. Exactly. And you could turn that off. I mean, certainly you could turn that off. You don't need to have that on, but I thought that would be kind of interesting to have in there. But yeah, we definitely could turn that off easily. Just zero that out. Now we've got zero gravity particles that are going to be sloshing around in here. So it actually is interesting. You kind of hit this point where you go kind of further in your simulation and it actually starts to almost stabilize a bit more because the constraint becomes hard enough that it'll allow for some collisions. But yeah, that's interesting. There's like some weirdness happening there. Let's see if we go further. It's almost like there's this like weird middle ground where everything doesn't want to like properly collide, and then you start to get a little bit higher and it does actually start doing some more normal things. Okay, so there are some intersections here, but if I'm remembering correctly, I think if things start intersecting, they will stay that way sometimes. Unless they get obviously pulled apart, and then I think they'll try to remain apart. So let's see what this looks like in motion. Yeah, that was where the original bounce at the beginning came from. Yes, exactly. But it was yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot of different things kind of going on here. But yeah, so the thing that you're gonna notice here as well, it's kind of interesting. They like float up to the top at the beginning there. The thing you're gonna notice here is that you're not gonna get quite the same density because they're trying to match to those those points, right? So in here, there's a lot more separation, and there is some intersection going on there as well. So, I almost want to just do a wedge of these or something real quick to just see what they all look like. All right, let's go back down and see how this reacts. So the more, yeah, also that's another thing too, with the gravity off, it does help compress down to fill in the gaps. Yes, exactly. I literally just about to say that. That's so funny. Yeah. So as it compresses, that'll fill the gaps in as well. But yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised that it does flow so nicely at these higher stiffness values. I would have thought it would get just crazy jittery and not want to resolve properly. So yeah, let's turn gravity back on. Let me just revert that to defaults and just see what this looks like. Yeah, so in that case, the stiffness of the constraint is so much higher that it just overrides gravity almost in that case. Obviously gravity is 9 meters per second. And if the stiffness is even relatively in the same ballpark, maybe 10 is actually like tries to resolve at 10 meters per second or something like that. You could see how setting a constraint. Yeah, exactly. And truly that's always the thing that happens in simulation, right? You have so many competing factors, right? So, in this case, the competing factors are on 2 simulations as well, which is like, yeah, there's a lot of things to figure out. And that's really like, I think that's the kind of the thing you always have to look for in building a simulation, right? Is like, what are the factors that are going to be, kind of these tipping points for your simulation? So it's not always easy to figure out exactly what's going on there. But like, so yeah, it's interesting. This gets real strange when you get to these like middle values in between those. You get some real like jittery positions there. So let's just see if this solver, if we turn up the substeps a little bit, if that will help with that. No, it doesn't. It actually seems worse. So what could be happening there then is the more substeps you have, obviously you have, in this case, you'd have 3 substeps, right? So you'd be able to, it's actually calculating 3 times every frame, trying to resolve that constraint. And on top of that, there's 100 constraint iterations, which are then being, you're multiplying those by the number of substeps, right? So, yeah, it has a lot of chances to resolve those. So look at this guy right under my mouse, absolutely losing its mind. Just, oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, that's an epilepsy warning right there. Yeah, so we're not going to do that. Let's just see. So yeah, let's go back here and let's take a look at what was going on here, because this was kind of interesting too, because it was loose enough to kind of give us a solve. And yeah, you're seeing the what are those, the particles originally there. So now this is where the where really gravity has won mostly in that fight, and then the constraint is trying to resolve, right? So that's where that stiffness is trying to then resolve itself back together. And the damping ratio kind of bleeds off velocity energy, so that if you have jittering things like that, it can help. But it does take away, I forget exactly how they'll describe it here, but yeah, so too much damping can prevent the constraint from being satisfied. So again, another balancing act where it's like you can damp it, but don't damp it too much, because then it's not going to satisfy the condition either. So, so that looks good. Let's try that then. Let's go back to this and turn this up here as well. So that should bleed some velocity out of these. Yeah, it is. Let's go down a little bit, see if that's any better. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. There's some stuff going on there. That's kind of neat. Another thing to consider here as well is I have a feeling if I turn this rest length down, this is going to get real crazy as well. Yeah. Oh, actually it didn't. Oh, because it didn't resim. That's weird. Didn't see that as an update. This might be really rigid because I just turned the rest length down to 0. So that's causing it to, those constraints have no length. Although they shouldn't have length, they now have 0 length. And they really almost can't even stretch. I'm trying to think about that. I guess they could stretch, but I don't know how something with no length stretches. It's interesting. Interesting thought. Let me just look here. So if you want to check out what's going on with your constraints, you can select this node here. We're here to Constraint Geometry, and we can look at this primitives section. And yeah, the rest length is 0. I'm curious what those were like before. They're probably really small. Yeah, they are small. The other thing too that might get a little crazy here is the bend. You can actually do this orientation pin type as well, which is how it's oriented based on, the 2 pinned ends. Now in this case, there's a 0 rest length, right? I don't know if this will change it at all. Might. Oh, I'm just watching the simulation. That's not simming anything. That's just the points the way they were before. Yeah, so just like I know we were just talking, like I think Orient came in there and mentioned like, so what if you had like a flow in here or something else happening, right? Like a velocity or something else. that was unique to just this simulation, how would that react? So let's take a look at that. Let's give that a shot. So let's turn this down again. Maybe let's see where 10 it lands us with a little more damping. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad actually. Kind of like that. Yeah, that's looking kind of cool. All right, so let's do one thing first. Let's kind of take this one step at a time. So let's add in a collider here and see what that's like. So, I mean, we can just do something really simple. We can just put a cube in here, right? And just, it seems like there's a few intersections. Let's see. Honestly, I'm not really seeing a lot. But yeah, substeps definitely will help with that. I'm not really seeing any intersections, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but they seem few and far between. It might be more when you're looking at it like further away, it might feel like they're intersecting. But when you get up close, it doesn't really feel like there's too many. Don't really see a bunch. I don't know. I don't really see any there. Might just be perspective, you know, just like certain perspectives. Yeah. I think I mean, you're looking at it through my stream and all this stuff. So yeah, it could just be an illusion. Yeah, it's always tough when you're not the one controlling it to to see something in perspective and be like, wait, what is actually happening there? Like, I get the added benefit of being able to go through and adjust everything. So why don't we? Okay, so let's do this actually. Let's turn this back down so that we can get that kind of really low where gravity kind of takes over and it's mostly just, everything is just kind of on the ground. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of push, I think, a geometry through this. So why don't I do something that's smooth so it'll be relatively easy for it to come across actually. So let's just do a sphere, something simple, and put this into the collision port here because that will just make our lives a little bit easier. We just use this default stuff. And I'll just have this animate across maybe at like, I don't know, 72 frames. Turn the brain off down here so we can just animate this. So 72, I'll just put a keyframe there. And then, I don't know, something like here. Maybe there. Just put another keyframe across and just see what happens here. Just to see how fast that is. Yeah, maybe a little too fast. Oh, oops. What the heck did I just do? I didn't even know that was a thing. There's too many things in Houdini sometimes. You never know what you just did. I just shift clicked and there's a range thing. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even, there you go. There we go. We just learned something new. I probably could have just done this and shifted it. I don't know. What is that for? What's happening? I don't even know what's happening there. Is that going to work? Is that going to pull it over here? Oh, that's fantastic. There you go. So I shift clicked down here and that selected it. And then I right clicked. No, what did I do? I alt. No, what did I do? Sorry. Oh, wow. There are a lot of controls for that. I never knew that. What did I just do? So, oh, there we go. Control middle click will move your keyframe if it's selected down there. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even know that. Gosh, there's too many things to know in here. I swear. Anyways, okay, cool. That's good. Just want to animate a sphere. Should have done the steam engine like that video had for the animating a cube. All right, turn the brain back on. Maybe turn my brain back on. All right, so it should collide with this and it should animate. So this is like kind of the more simple you know, conceptual thing where you're colliding with it, right? And then we can introduce some velocities in here as well. So let's see how this works. Should work, but yeah. Oh yeah, it's working. So at a certain point, those particles are going to want to snap around there, right? Back to their kind of respective original positions. So kind of interesting that you could, you know, take something with, you know, a fluid sim and then treat it like this and have, you know, this simulation react to it as well, which is just interesting, you know? And obviously the lower, it's got a couple stuck there. Come on, buddy. You can overcome that little bit of friction. That's oh, that's so wild. I actually didn't expect that to just stay like that. Perfectly balanced. But yeah, so obviously these objects are going to get out of its way and kind of flow around it. Yeah, and the less stiff those collisions are, the slower, you know, the less, you know, tension, I guess you could say, on that rubber band there'll be when they want to snap back into those animated points. The other thing that's going to be a little tricky to do here is overcome that constraint with a velocity, right? So let's just cut this. We can leave it there. It's animated. So let's think about that. So we'd want some sort of a velocity that's going to be strong enough to kind of break those, not break, but stretch those constraints so that they actually overcome the strength of that, you know, rubber band kind of pin constraint that we have. So let me think, what would be the best way of doing this maybe? Excuse me. Just trying to think of the quickest way to make a velocity. Okay. Why don't we just do something like a line, and we'll put this in the X direction, and I'll just move this back like so, and let's do the length a little bit more. Just add a bunch of points to that. And I'm just going to basically add let's see, we're going to do just hit random buttons apparently. We'll do a curve. What is it called? Orientation along curve. And I'll just use that to make a velocity vector in this direction. And then that's good. And I'm just going to change that to V. So that'll be a velocity instead. We should see. What? There we go. Had to turn it off and on. All right, so there's the velocities. Great. Let's see. Just take that and we will do a I'm just trying to think of I feel like there's a faster way of doing this. I'm just being stupid. Anyways, all right, let's just make a VDB from polygons, and I will just do a wireframe around that. Oh, sorry, polywire. Wrong one. There we go. Sorry, my brain is a little fried right now. I'm just trying to think of, I feel like there's a faster way of doing this. What am I doing here? Volume. Is this a quicker way of doing that? Oh. Right. I could just do this. That should work. And if I do this a bunch more, I don't know, whatever, 200, doesn't really matter. Just points. Great. All right, that's looking pretty good. Cool. All right, that's a volume velocity. Whatever. Ay. It's also very warm in my office right now, so that's not helping the old brain work. Okay, so we've got a volume velocity. Maybe we'll just do that just to give it a little more. And sure, that's great. All right, so let's go in here. We'll do a, what is it? Effect. Volumes. We'll add that as a to the force. And what did I do here? Do velocity field. Drop this in here. Is that called vel? It's not. It's called v. So I will just adjust that. Be easier to do it this way. Great. Just in case it really wants it to be named v. All right, let's see what happens here. We should have some velocities in there, and then I'm going to scale those so that they're not just blowing the thing around all the time. Probably not strong enough by default. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, that's real bizarre. So yeah, what it's obviously it's kind of doing the same thing as the collision, right? But it's pushing just those particles, right? Obviously, that's a very boring velocity field. There's nothing really that interesting going on there. It's kind of just solid. But it is pushing these, you know, you can see here it's kind of like spreading out at the end here. And we could probably bring this down and do this up maybe. That'll probably be a little more interesting, right? Maybe, I don't know. Oh, the other interesting thing you could do is not ignore mass. Wonder what that would do. Probably move the little guys a lot further maybe if they have less mass. Oh, they don't have any mass, that's why. That don't matter. Anyways, so yeah, so you can add in velocities and things like that. We could also tweak this velocity field here. We could add like an adjust vector, and we could make some noise happen there. Oh yeah, we'll just change it to vel so we can see it. Let's just do noise, And we don't want it to be positive. We want it to be 0 centered because we want it to go up and down, right? And then for the, we want to do animation on it like this. Probably make the element size a little bigger. Pulse duration a little slower. And that should do that. The other thing we could do, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, is instead of doing this, it would actually be a little bit more interesting to Vellum particles. I like that. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's a good one. I like that. Yeah, you definitely could. You definitely could make. I like that. That's a good typo if it is one. If not, also made me laugh. What I could actually do here now that I'm thinking of it is, let's see, adjust fog. Is that going to have noise based in it? Yes, it should. So what I could do here is instead I'll do val. And do noise. Interesting. Huh. Oh, right. Sorry. This is actually for just fog. My bad. This isn't for vector stuff. All right, we'll just use this. That'll give us something a little more interesting. All right, so let's see what this does. Maybe just push this a little harder. Yep, so that's obviously working. That's cool. Yeah, so there is actually, I'm gonna turn this off. There is actually a pop. What is it called? Is it a pop curve? I think it's the pop curve force, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, I think it's the curve force. Yep. In fact, I feel like I've used this before on one of the streams. So this one would be a little bit different because we'd want to do it. So let's just take another line and we'll put it up. I don't think the length needs to be that long. Let's just have the origin go down a little bit. I could probably do, I don't know, 16 points. I'm not really sure how many we'll need. Yeah, that looks good. And we'll say pop curve. So we're going to say the follow scale is 0. We don't want it to have any follow. Suction maybe is 0. And 10 for the orbit. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably too much. 5 maybe. So yeah, there you go. You got a little swirl going on here. And this has some other, you could add some follow forces and it's going to lift it up, right? So that's going to do some really interesting stuff. So now you've got like a tornado happening here, maybe. Yeah, this curve force is very very helpful. In fact, I think there's even like a normal curve force. It's a little hard to see maybe what's going on here. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's funny. We'll turn the air resistance down a little bit so it's not so intensely doing that. And then maybe we'll turn off the guide geometry. You can see a little bit better what's happening here. Yeah, so you can make like a little vortexy kind of thing. And that's something you could do obviously in any fluid simulation, right? Or in any particle simulation in Vellum. So if you just had regular grains that were just in the scene, you could do that as well. But yeah, since you're dealing with, since you've kind of decoupled these two simulations, right? It's now trying to get those points back to the positions they were in the fluid simulation, but in this case, we're pushing them around and doing all sorts of stuff with them. So they really can't ever get back to that position because we're throwing them around and stuff. They maybe eventually will, but they're kind of stuck in these forces or colliders or things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with this for sure. And it definitely is interesting from the standpoint of, being able to use it as like a way to almost get a quasi rigid body type situation going along with it. It certainly is. It's an interesting thing that you could maybe play around with to get something for, maybe a MoGraph part, piece or something like that you're working on. So, I think is there also just a curve force? Yeah. So, that curve force is really, really helpful. There's actually a gas curve force as well. And that was super helpful I was doing a simulation with compressors. They're just like commercial compressors and there was gas going through them and spinning and stuff like that. And just using those curve forces and being able to kind of set, that follow, the suction, all that kind of stuff, was able to like allow me to get the gases to kind of flow around and do all sorts of, interesting things. And if you use something like this pop curve force, you could certainly use that in your flip simulation as well. I mean, let's give it a shot. I think we could actually just lift it right out of here, bring it over here and take a look. Yeah, good. I'm glad it's something interesting from that standpoint. Yeah, there we go. That's a little too strong, but it's doing it, I guess, right? Oh, that's fun. That's different. What do we got going on here? Yeah, we probably need a little bit of suction, is my guess, because it's like pushing it out. Here, I'll just turn this off. Might be a little too high on the old scales here. Let's see. If we go back. Yeah, there's not really like a a random thing here, but you could probably just do pop wind as well. So this probably isn't the smartest way to do messing with flip fluids, because you're really just putting them onto the particle velocity. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But yeah, kind of interesting. You can do some kind of neat stuff here with this. Let's see here. If I do this. Oh yeah. Yeah, so you could get a little bit of a... Oh, there's like a singularity forming down here at the bottom, though. What am I doing? I've broken it. Broken everything. Well, anyways, it works in here too, so it's kind of fun. I mean, you could always do it on your flip simulation if you wanted to. Yeah, so hopefully that's kind of an interesting thing to see and, you know, understand, because obviously this is particle sims as well. So, I mean, you know, these aren't, you know, mutually exclusive nodes that you can only use in one instance or whatever. You can use it multiple places. So you can just move them around anywhere where you're dealing with particles. You can use the pop forces, which is cool. So, oh, sure. No, it's fine. Not off topic. Not that off topic at all. Yeah, so I have a Threadripper 3970 for my CPU, which is really nice for being able to do rendering and things like that. I think there's some cases where it's single core, you know, single thread speed kind of loses out to quite a few other chips. So depending on the simulation, it's good or bad, but it's really good for rendering. It's awesome for rendering. And I have 128 gigs of RAM, so I'm able to cache a lot, obviously. I would probably up this, but I might get a new computer in the coming years or whatever, so I'm kind of just like, whatever. But 128 is like a great number, I think, for doing Houdini stuff. And then I have a RTX 3090 for my graphics card. It's the Founders Edition one. And it's great. It's been really good. So yeah, so those are my computer specs. Had to fight some bots back at the end of 2020 for that 3090, but they were vanquished and I got one. So I was very excited to have one. But yeah, I love my PC. I think I literally, at my previous job that I worked for with a studio called D-Post in Buffalo, we literally have we all got machines that were like this because I liked it so much. And so we all had basically the same spec machines, except I doubled my RAM there because I wasn't paying for it. So it was really nice. But anyways, but you don't have to have a computer that's super beefy in order to do that. You know, for my work with side effects, I just have a laptop that I work off of. And I don't really do as much simulation and crazy stuff like that. Most of my teaching is a little bit more based on instructors and you know, trainers at studios and things like that, or, you know, teachers, instructors, things like that. So we're doing more conceptual stuff to let them teach. So I have, for that, it's just a Intel chip in there. I think it's like an 8-core chip. 10,000 series, 32 gigs of RAM, and there's a 3080 in there. So, RTX 3080. So that's a good spec too. And actually it renders okay. I mean, if you're using XPU, it works really well. If you're using CPU, it's not so great. So, but anyways, yeah, no, I love talking about tech stuff. I'm obsessed with computers. I've been building and working on computers for years. So anyways, does anybody else have any like thoughts or suggestions or questions about this? Anything that I can clarify? I could keep just dropping down nodes and doing silly stuff all night, but I just want to make sure everything is clear and makes sense. I'm also sweating my butt off right now in my office. So, old house, 1920s house. So it's, the AC is enough, but it's not always that great. So, I probably will be ending shortly unless anyone has any questions or wants me to clarify anything. Any benefits to using Flip as opposed to Vellum Fluid? That's a great question. I think that if you're going to be using Vellum Fluid, it makes way more sense to set up your Vellum Fluid as a DOP network, because I think it's a lot simpler to deal with it, because with the SOP-based setup, it's expecting you to put something in as your initial start, to your simulation. And it feels a little bit, there seems to be a little bit, for me at least, I don't know why, it just seems like every time I do it, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to do this one little random thing in order to make it work, because it wants to have all these nodes feeding into it. Whereas conversely, if you're working in the DOP network, it's a little different the way that it kind of deals with the fluids, right? Because it's just sourcing the fluid in. So that's one thing I would say. So you would really want to set up it in the DOP network. I feel like it's actually easier to do it that way. But I don't really see any difference with it. If you're doing if you're doing large scale stuff, Flip is going to be a lot more effective. If you're doing a ton of particles and things like that, Flip is going to be more there. You're going to get better performance with it, because that's what it's made to do. Vellum is really for small scale fluids. So I guess you could take that as the reasons to use it. Yep. That's literally what I just said. That's funny. Yes, exactly. Vellum is for small scale simulation and Flip is for large scale. 100%. Yep. And the reason that is true is because, with Flip, you're dealing with particles and volumes. And so you can kind of deal with these larger sources, these larger simulations a little bit easier, because you're kind of, you have multiple representations of it. Whereas, when you're getting down to something really small, it actually becomes really hard to do a Flip simulation, because you're kind of trying to solve both of these things at the same time, really, really tiny. That's where just having the particles of Vellum is a better way to do that solve. At least that's my understanding of it. But, yes, that is definitely the case. So I would say that, like, if you're trying to do something small, like little splash, like a little blob of something that's like in 0G, and like they kind of what they showed in the 19 release, if you remember that, when they had all this stuff swirling around. If you're doing something like that where it's just a little blob of fluid, it might be better to just do a Vellum sim, and then if you need to, you could always do a particle simulation after that. From that, you might be able to pull that off with a multi-solver, because they're both, well, no, not really, because it has to do with the attributes on the point. So I don't think you would be able to do that in like a DOP simulation with a multi-solver. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the multi-solver, there are some things. Yeah, no problem. Not multi-solver, DOP network is what I want. So if you haven't seen this before, man, that network is getting to be a mess. There is a multiple solver node, and the way that these work is you actually put the object you want to have worked on here. So like if it was like a pop object or something like this, right? Then you would do a pop solver and you'd wire that into here. And then if, I don't know, if you did like a rigid body solver or something like that. I've seen some things like this that people have done before. You could do that and then you'd have a pop, like, but I'm not sure why exactly you would need to do that, because you could just really, the rigid body solver works almost, you could put, the pop solver isn't going to do a whole lot for you in that case. But anyways, so there's stuff like that you can do. And so a lot of times people will resort to really complicated multi-solver things like this. In fact, if you dive into some solvers that were created by, some of these main solvers here, if I go into this DOPNet, nope. Which one was it? I just saw it. Oh, it might be the flip solver, in fact. If you go into here and go into the DOP network, oh, cool. If you do that, it crashes your computer, and then that's it. I could show you real quick. I'm actually curious now anyways, but that was fun. Hey, bye Houdini. Let's try that again. I'm not even going to open that previous scene because I'm almost done. So we'll just look at this real quick. See if this is true or not. I think this is true. Let's see. DOPNet. And because I just saw it the other day. Yep, there it is. Multi-solver right here. So there's actually two different things going on here. So this is all stuff that's special that sets up all the domain type things. So this is all the really fancy, crazy stuff that's happening in the fluid solver apart from just the regular flip that was happening. So yeah, DOPs are wild, man. So you really got to know what you're doing when you start getting into this stuff. And to be honest, I know the guys, well, I've started to get to know some of the people that do that to actually make these solvers, and they're way smart. So make me feel like, like I'm in kindergarten or whatever. So it's always interesting to hear them talk about all that stuff. But anyways, yeah, so filament solver. What? Filamented vect. Is that what you're talking about? Is that in DOPS? I truly don't know what that is. I have not heard of that before. Filament solver. What in the world is this thing? No, I have literally no idea what this is. Pulling up the help. Yes, I have seen that before. I never really thought of it. Huh. Interesting. Sheesh. Yeah, it's interesting. No, I hadn't seen that before. That's fascinating. There we go. There's what I learned today, that there's a filament solver that I just have never even put down. There are other solvers that ripple solver. Hopefully that's one of the main ones that I've never touched before. Yeah, most of the other ones I at least kind of understand what they do. Anyways, here, watch me just look at solvers. This is an exciting stream, guys. Anyways, yeah, well, hopefully got something out of that. And yeah, if you're interested next week I will not be here, so just keep that in mind. I will be out. And I will be, I'll be up in SIGGRAPH for the first time in several years. Big shock, some stuff is still happening in the world, but we're trying to ignore it now, I guess. But I'll be up in Vancouver enjoying SIGGRAPH next week, so I will not be streaming. But if you keep an eye out, I actually will hopefully be on the Houdini battle that they're going to be doing at the Houdini event there. So that'll be online probably like the next day or the day after, whenever they put the videos up from SIGGRAPH. So, no problem. I'm really glad that you guys were able to join, and love always getting to chat with you guys and me learn some stuff too. Learn about the filament solver. Maybe I'll be playing with that just to wrap my head around what that is. But cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here on the stream, and thank you if you're watching after the fact. And hopefully I will see you guys all in a couple weeks. If ever you guys are needing some help with anything or are watching an old video and trying to understand how something was done, please, you can always reach out in the Discord. Happy to help out. And if you're running into trouble on your own, your own stuff or whatever, and you need a hand, let me know. Try to give you a hand as best I could. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see everybody next time. Have a good night. Bye.